ladies and gentlemen, Alan Smith.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan. This is the fourth talk that I've given to the Society. And when I was composing it, when I was putting it together, it was the hardest one of any talk that I've given. I was born in Seaham. I was raised in Seaham. My family grew up in Seaham. I was immersed. My father wasn't a miner. He worked at Barclays Bank in Seaham, which is now the Black Truffle restaurant on the front of Seaham. But everything about our lives as children in Seaham, from the three pits, everything was about the pit. The town was immersed in it, and I'm sure many of you growing up in similar pit villages and pit towns in Sunderland itself, your lives were just immersed in coal. At the time of the miners' strike, I wasn't impartial. If my life hadn't gone a different way because of education, there is no doubt that I could well have been in the pit. Quite happily, most of my mates were there. Tonight, as I present my view of the 1984 miners' strike, I try to be totally impartial. I'll do my best. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is a piece of coal. Gold. It's very rare. When we were children, it was everywhere. It was, again, our lives were immersed in it. Probably nowadays, or very likely, your children and your grandchildren have never even seen a piece of coal. You will be aware, I'm sure, that in the last fortnight, the last coal-powered hydroelectricity station was closed down. Coal is no longer on the agenda in this country. It doesn't play a part. 40 years ago, it was everywhere. Now, it took me a while to find a piece of coal. Very difficult to get your hands on. Why has coal become so rare? The miners' strike of 1984-85 lasted a year. It was a hugely confrontational, extremely bitter and violent industrial action which sought to shut down the British coal industry in an attempt to prevent colliery closures. It was led by this gentleman, Arthur Scargill, the president of the National Union of Mine Workers, the NUM, against the National Coal Board, the NCB, a government agency. The opposition to the strike was led by the Conservative government under its Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, who desperately wanted to reduce the power of the trade unions. The government clearly believed that if it defeated the miners, the workers, with the greatest solidarity, it would have defeated the entire British trade union movement. The strike was without doubt the most violent industrial dispute of the 20th century. Violence permeated it. I'm going to show you a 2-minute clip taken during the time of the miners' strike, much of it taken in villages that you might well recognise. It's extremely violent. I don't show it because it glorifies the violence. I don't show it to take a side. I'm sure that when we track through the events of this strike, you will very clearly see that violence was very equidistant. It was shared on both sides of the strike. Seaham was just immersed in cool. These gentlemen were regular visitors to come to Seaham. We called them blasties. They came to the blast beach in Seaham. They collected the coal, they bagged it, and we were informed as boys that they then pushed it all the way to Sunderland where they got 50 shillings a bag. I don't know if that was true. Pit life formed very much of the vocabulary of Seaham. I grew up in the cricket club dressing room at Seaham Harbour, and I worked alongside miners. And the pitmatic was very much a form of the conversation that used to go on within that dressing room. Sometimes I would have to interject into a conversation because I couldn't understand what was being said. Because often the miners who were in that dressing room would speak in pitmatic, and sometimes they spoke so loudly as well, I think because they were used to working underground. And sometimes they would say, oh, no, because it was always with a, oh, it was no good. And I would have to say, excuse me, sorry? And then they would be quite rude to me, which I didn't mind one iota. But it was fascinating. Words such as cutting, which you know means falls. Words such as dunge, which means to collide, I'll dunge you away. I'll bump into you sharply. Femmer, fragile, Fred. It was often said about an opposition footballer if he was fair. It wasn't a compliment. Your manner, you knew what your manner was. He was your friend. And your hoggers, pit clothes, which ones, please? Shorts, yes? Pit shorts in your hoggers.
Subscribe to our channel and we'll let you know when there's a new video to watch. The subscribe button is below the video next to the like, share and comment icons. To watch another video, just click on one of the pictures above the arrows now.